Welcome to Therapy Inspired podcast. As therapists, we have a unique view of the world. We hold a space for grief and trauma, and yet we also get to witness resilience and healing, all while being human ourselves. We hope to share helpful psychoeducation with our insights from our world as psychotherapists. And now a disclaimer. We'll be talking about things related to therapy. However, listening or engaging with this podcast does not equate to a therapist-client relationship. And while we may discuss insights from working with various clinical issues, we don't reference specific cases. Hi, my name is Darby Crosby, and I'm the owner of Crosby Counseling and Wellness. I offer individual, couple, and family therapy through virtual means all through Ontario. I also offer clinical supervision to registered psychotherapists and registered psychotherapists qualifying and other practitioners who need supervision.
I'm Kameela Osman. I'm a registered social worker and a psychotherapist. I have a practice in Bowmanville where I see clients in person and I see clients virtually Ontario-wide. Today, we're talking about breaking the bounce back myth, the power in pause.
I think it's really important to sort of consider pausing because often when there are stressful events that happen in our life, people feel that we should deal with them immediately and then sort of move on. And people don't give us a lot of time. And most of the time, I think what's healthier is to sort of pause and say, okay, this is difficult. What am I going to do? What are my options? Right? Instead of being very impulsive about, going ahead and trying to answer it and then figuring out you have to change it. I think we can pause guilt-free. I think we can pause stress-free.
What do you
Um,
think stops people from, as I think you're talking about some of that external pressure to bounce back, but I think that there are layers to it. And
Definitely.
so what do you notice, Darby, in terms of those barriers to embracing pause?
I think it's again that the sort of North American perspective is that we always have to be productive or we always have to be doing. And if you're sitting and pausing, that's not productive. But I think it's actually the opposite. Like if I can sit and sort of regroup, right, and sort of calm myself, then I'm much more online mentally. I'm much more capable of weighing the pros and cons of the situation and making a better, more informed choice.
That's a big thing that sticks out to me. When we pause, we can be intentional around our next step. Whereas I agree with you. I think that narrative is, we need to push through, or inaction is weak. We need to act now and, keep pushing through, move forward, let go of things, I think is a big thing. We need to let go and move forward. But there's value in just sitting with something for a little bit. It's not sitting in a rut. It really is just pause and notice.
Right. And it was something like you had said that on previous podcast too, is that there are two ways of sort of looking at disputes. Like there are some people who say, don't go to bed mad.
Mhm.
And you were also saying last time that it's okay. You don't want to go to bed mad, but you don't need to solve the problem. You can agree to sort of pause, wait, and then come back with, fresh eyes after a good night's sleep. And I think that that's really important because we can get so spinny in our emotions that it becomes really difficult to even figure out what we want to do, like what I want, right? And I
What
think
I
it's
hear
important.
in what you're sharing, Darby, is that pause offers perspective. When you pause, you can take that step back and you
Mhm.
get better perspective from pause. And so, again, I think that is so key that we overlook. I need to keep pushing through, but did we actually slow down and see what we're reacting to? Did we observe, what's the ripple effect from the actions we've already taken or the actions of like what led us to this point? Can we slow down and press that pause and get that perspective?
And I think there's this myth too that if our children misbehave, that we have to correct them immediately.
Mhm.
So we can say, stop fighting, like go do something else. And I'm going to talk to you about this later, right?
Mhm.
We can pause even in terms of those interventions so that we can come back and be more thoughtful about what we need to teach our children in that moment of frustration, or what maybe it's my moment of frustration and I shouldn't be sort of interacting with my children, right? So we need to understand where that's coming from. Is it me that got triggered? Is it you that got triggered? And, how can I move forward?
Yeah. Again, that intentionality is huge. And it really does de-escalate things. And so that immediate reaction will often be more intense, more dysregulated than, I call it, like a reactive reaction
Right.
versus that intentional choiced reaction. And so if we can offer ourselves just a little bit of that pause to process, then we're going to be responding more in line with our values versus reaction that can be tied to our histories, our past experiences, what we've been role modeled, and it may not be balanced thought of what matches with our values now, our current values.
And you're right that our past or our past patterns feed into conversation. So when I become emotional because we're talking about a hot topic with my partner, for example, I'm more likely to go into a past pattern because that feels comfortable to me. But it's not really advantageous because the past pattern is the thing that created the problem, right? So I have to be conscious and capable enough to sort of say, I'm going to break this cycle and I'm going to do something differently. And it's less emotional, like you're saying, more intentional. It
Let's
helps
talk
with all
about,
communication.
sorry.
That's okay. I said just helps with all communication.
Yeah. Let's talk about the bounce back part of it because I think that's something too. Again, that nature and the narratives, as we said, that reinforces this bounce back. How can we unhook from that idea that we need to be, like I said, over it or move forward, let it go, and just move on?
I think that comes to allowing ourselves to be okay with this this situation, whatever the situation is. So I don't like this, I don't like that, but I'm okay in this moment. And then it gives me the freedom to sort of say, okay, I don't like that, I don't like this. And I get to sort of work through that without any pressure to rush through. So then I feel more calm in making my decisions so that when I come back and say, okay, this is, what we're going to do, this is how we're going to engage, that I am more present, more focused, more grounded. And then that gives me more resilience and strength, which makes me in turn feel more like I have more mastery over the situation, which creates a greater ability to be comfortable in the situation.
I think sometimes, on that train of thought is to work at communicating to other people that I'm okay with slowing down right now. I'm not rushing through this. So whether it's, I'm thinking, I don't know why, like the idea of job loss is coming to me. I don't need to, figure out how am I going to put my resumes out there or do that next step. Can we slow down? Can we, tell people, you know what, I'm going to take a week for myself and gather my thoughts and feelings. This is really disheartening and disappointing. I need to sit in this or grieve this for a moment before I look at those next steps and moving forward. And I'm just using that as an example, but we can apply that to any disappointment.
But I think you're right, is that I have to feel the disappointment. Like I have to experience the disappointment in its fullness. Like I can't be sort of feeling it on the bottom and then doing all this stuff on top because I'm not giving it the full space. And I think that that's really important. Like we get 3 days off for bereavement leave if an immediate family member unfortunately dies. And that's not enough time. I mean, that's barely acknowledging what happened, right?
Yeah, yeah. Often that is just, the initial stages of planning a funeral, let alone time for bereavement. Bereavement
Mhm.
happens after. And we know this, like even if there is 6 months or 8 therapy sessions, things like big life changes, whether that's grief or something else, we're not going to wrap it up in a bow and say, like, okay, you're done with that. That's never going to come up now. It's practicing the processing, or not practicing, but going through the processing and then practicing the coping tools, and relating to it a little bit differently, but it may come up in different points. Something might activate that thought or that memory of that difficult time.
Like one of the major tasks of grieving, which I think we mentioned before, is to accept the reality of the loss. And the reality is not just, somebody's not going to be there, but the reality is multifactorial, like you were just saying. And I think whenever we have sort of a setback, whenever we have a struggle, it's the same thing. Understand the full parameters of what this situation is and how it impacts me, right? And then I'm able to sort of say, okay, let's see what I can do.
And I find that the processing, like when you're in it, when it's happened, when you're in that struggle, actually helps ensure that this doesn't remain as something that's unprocessed, that's raw, that creates reactions later on. So if I sit with whatever that struggle is again, when it happened and I take that week off work, or I slow down and I, take a day off work, whatever we need, depending on context, that it means that 2 months from now, if that comes up because of something that, reminds me of it, it isn't as intense as if I didn't. If we
Right.
bottle, if we suppress, if we try to push through, it's more at risk of catching us off guard.
Well, and I think that happens a lot in parenting because we have struggles with parenting, and we're not going to take a day off of parenting, but we can take an hour, we can take 15 minutes, right? And I think, you know, like if we don't sort of come to terms with whatever the behaviors are, like the kids are fighting all the time. Like if we can't come to terms with that on some level, the next time we hear all the sort of bickering, we're going to be activated again. So if I can take that 5, 15, 10, 20 minutes, whatever, and get myself under control and figure out, okay, so if this happens again, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to give my kids the tools that they need to sort of communicate better so they're not bickering all the time. Like we need to take that time in order to be able to sort of take care of ourselves. I think it's a gift to ourselves.
But I see that in regards to, like we're saying, any struggle that we face. I could see that as we've been talking about with grief, but I also see that with relationships, expecting our relationship to be better. We had, a big fight and we had a good talk about it and we got to the other side of that particular fight. And then I hear so much that couples will then say, why is it coming up again? So a month later, it stirs up and it comes up again. And that's just also you touched on something earlier of like acceptance. If we can accept, there's going to be meetings and partings. There's going to be times where we align, and it's usually after conflict that we'll align. We had some disagreement and I had some good conversations from that disagreement, and we're aligned now. And then eventually we kind of fall back into our way of life, and we may, part a little bit in the way that we see each other, and we end up in disagreement again. And when we accept that, it doesn't feel as intense. And so that idea that we've talked about it, we should be healed, is kind of a false idea when it comes to relationships. But again, with other struggles too, just because we've done some processing doesn't mean it's done.
And as you said at the very beginning, they all have layers. And so often when we process the top layer. And then something comes up and then we can process subsequent ones. Right. And I think it's an ongoing thing. It's part of, how we grow and how we learn. When we learn to walk, we fall down a lot. Right. So why do we expect as adults that we can have one conversation and make it perfect? We have to keep working and growing and expanding.
And so, I think this idea of pause is key. With pause, I also think of mindfulness, the idea of like slowing down and just sitting with, noticing what comes up as part of that processing. I know we've been using the word processing a lot, and I feel like sometimes that's always like lost on clients. What does processing mean? What does it mean when therapists say sit with your emotions? It really is some of that mindfulness. And so if you're curious about pause, you can think of it like mindfulness. It's just noticing what comes up and accepting it with non-judgment, not getting pulled down by, it's not necessarily going down the rabbit hole of whether it's self-criticism or grief or whatever it may be. It's more just noticing, being the observer for a little while so that you can make that choice reaction when you're ready. It might also be rest, sitting with, I'm tired. Tired of being strong, or I'm tired of feeling the way that I'm feeling. Can I take a day and stay on the couch? Can I, take a day and stay by myself a little bit? Or can I take a day and connect with people that make me feel good? That rest might be different for different people, but it's the idea of taking a break from what's causing the distress.
And I think that's important. And I think sometimes we do get caught up with day-to-day living. Like, I have to make dinner right now. Right? When in actual fact, I probably would be a better service to myself if I took the dog for a walk or walked around the block, right? Just to sort of take some space. I think you're right. We need to be okay with taking what we need and calming ourselves down and being able to be okay with that.
Well, thank you for joining us today with Therapy Inspired. We will see you in a couple weeks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.